At 63, Scott Steiner has finally decided to clear the air. He's opened up about the rumors, his injuries, health issues, the backstage conflicts, and the controversies. For the first time, he's sharing what really went on behind the scenes and what led to some of the toughest moments in his career. Let's get into it. All through his career, Scott Steiner built up a reputation for being fiery and hard to deal with backstage. He wasn't the type to hold back his words or stay quiet. And because of that, he clashed with a lot of big names in wrestling. Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan, Diamond Dallas Page, you name it, Steiner had run-ins with them. These weren't just small disagreements either. They turned into very public feuds that fans and insiders still talk about today. But it wasn't just the drama backstage that made Steiner's journey so tough. Around the time of his WWE return in 2002, he went through one of the most serious challenges of his career. A devastating foot injury. According to Steiner, the injury left his foot completely paralyzed, a condition known as drop foot. Imagine being one of the most powerful athletic wrestlers in the world, and suddenly you can't move your foot the way you need to in the ring. That's exactly what he had to face. Despite the setback, Steiner kept pushing forward. He still wrestled with the injury, but his movement was limited, and it showed in his performances. Fans could see something wasn't the same, and behind the scenes, it was a constant struggle for him to keep going. That injury, he later admitted, never fully healed. Even today, he says the foot is still paralyzed. Eventually, the toll of wrestling with that kind of limitation caught up to him. By 2004, Steiner's time in WWE came to an end, and the company let him go. He later had surgery to try and stabilize the foot, but by then, the damage had already changed the course of his career. The injury didn't just affect his movement. It reshaped his entire run in WWE, making it one of the hardest chapters in his wrestling story. Now let's take a closer look at his career and find out what truly made Scott Steiner such an unforgettable figure in wrestling. His first steps into wrestling came through hard training under Dr. Jerry Graham Jr. at Torio's Health Club in Toledo, Ohio, as well as legendary figure The Sheik. These early years laid the foundation for what would eventually become one of the most unique and unforgettable careers in professional wrestling. Scott didn't waste much time making an impact. In 1986, wrestling under his real name, he stepped into the Indianapolis-based World Wrestling Association. That same year, on August 14th in Dearborn, Michigan, he pulled off something special. He defeated the Great Wojo to win the WWA World Heavyweight Championship. For a young wrestler just starting out, holding a world title was no small deal. He managed to keep the belt until May 1987, when he dropped it back to Wojo in Toledo. Even then, it was clear, Scott had something. After that, Scott decided to test the waters in tag team wrestling. Teaming up with his trainer, Jerry Graham, the two captured the WWA World Tag Team Championship in October 1987, beating Chris Carter and Muhammad Saad. Although their reign didn't last long, they dropped the titles back just 2 months later. Scott was learning the ropes of teamwork and building up experience that would prove vital later in his career. By 1988, Scott was ready for a change of scenery, so he joined the Memphis-based Continental Wrestling Association. Still wrestling under his real name, he formed a team with Billy Joe Travis. The duo found quick success, capturing the CWA World Tag Team Championship in May 1988. Titles changed hands fast in those days, and sure enough, they lost the belts just over a week later. By then, he had proven himself as a talented young star who could shine both on his own and in a team. Soon after, he left CWA, ready to step onto a bigger stage. That bigger stage came in the form of World Championship Wrestling. Scott made his WCW debut at Chi-Town Rumble, not in the ring, but in a backstage interview. He appeared alongside his brother Rick, who was already competing there. Scott started wrestling singles matches at first, but it wasn't long before he and Rick officially joined forces as a tag team, the Steiner Brothers. The Steiner Brothers' early days in WCW were a mix of highs and lows. Their first big match saw them lose to Kevin Sullivan and Mike Rotunda at Clash of the Champions 7, but they quickly bounced back, defeating the same team in a rematch at the Great American Bash 1989. The Steiners also tried their luck in the King of the Hill 2-ring battle royal, but didn't come out on top. Even so, the brothers were gaining attention, with Missy Hyatt as their manager and even their pet pit bull Arnold accompanying them to the ring. The Steiners stood out. Storylines at the time often included drama, and one of the most memorable angles saw Rick begin a relationship with a fan named Robin Green. At first, she came across as shy and innocent, but soon she underwent a dramatic makeover and became known as Woman. She betrayed the Steiners by tripping Scott at Clash of the Champions 8, costing them the NWA World Tag Team Championship. She later helped Sullivan and her new team, Doom, in attacking Scott. Despite the setbacks, the Steiners kept climbing. On November 1st, 1989 in Atlanta, Georgia, they captured their first NWA World Tag Team Championship by defeating the Fabulous Freebirds. That reign lasted over 5 months until Doom, with Woman in their corner, got the better of them at Capital Combat. But losses never stopped the Steiners for long. On August 24, 1990, they beat the Midnight Express to win the NWA United States Tag Team Championship. When WCW pulled out of the NWA in early 1991, the belts were renamed the WCW US Tag Team Championship, and the Steiners became key players in the division. Their star power kept growing. At Wrestle War 1991, the Steiners took part in the Brutal War Games match, showing just how tough they were. Days later, they added the World Championship Wrestling World Tag Team Championship to their collection, and shortly after that, they captured the Inoki Giant Wrestling Tag Team Championship in Japan, defeating Hiroshi Hase and Kensuke Sasaki. This made them Triple Crown champions, a rare honor for any tag team. While Rick remained the powerhouse, Scott started branching out into singles competition as well. In 1990, WCW introduced the Gauntlet Series, where a wrestler had to beat 3 stars in one weekend to win a $10,000 prize. Scott was the first man to successfully run the gauntlet, defeating Bobby Eaton, Ric Flair, and Arn Anderson in 3 straight nights. That accomplishment showed that Scott wasn't just a tag team guy. He could stand toe-to-toe with the best in the business. On January 30th, 1991, Scott even challenged Ric Flair for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship at Clash of the Champions 14th. The match ended in a time-limit draw, but it proved that Scott had what it took to be a main event player. Later, when Rick got injured in 1992, Scott carried the load with singles matches. That same year, he captured the WCW World Television Championship before he and Rick decided to leave WCW after a contract dispute. In late 1992, the Steiner brothers moved to the World Wrestling Federation. There were even discussions backstage about pushing Scott as a breakout singles star. Some officials suggested having him debut in the 1993 Royal Rumble and possibly even win it. But Vince McMahon wasn't sold on the idea, and the Steiners themselves preferred to stick together as a team. So instead of going solo, they made their debut as a tag team, appearing on the very first episode of Monday Night Raw in January 1993. The Steiners made an immediate impact in WWF. At WrestleMania 9, they defeated the Head Shrinkers in an exciting match. They went on to feud with Money Inc., trading the WWF Tag Team Championships with them in a series of matches in June 1993. For fans in Michigan, it was extra special to see the Steiners successfully defend the titles in their home state at SummerSlam that August. But things weren't always smooth. In September 1993, the Steiners lost their tag team titles to the Quebecers in controversial fashion during a Province of Quebec rules match. Scott did manage to get some payback by beating Pierre in a singles match the following week, but by early 1994, their time in WWF was winding down. Scott entered the Royal Rumble that year as the very first entrant, but was eliminated after about 9 minutes. Shortly after, the brothers left WWF. From there, they went back to Japan, where they found success once again by winning the IWGP Tag Team Championships 2 more times. In 1995, they made a brief run in Extreme Championship Wrestling, teaming with stars like Eddie Guerrero and Taz in wild, hard-hitting matches. While their ECW stint was short, it added another unique chapter to their ever-expanding wrestling story. When the Steiner brothers returned to WCW in 1996, it felt like the start of a new chapter for both Scott and Rick. Fans were already familiar with their hard-hitting style and amateur wrestling background, but WCW in the mid-90s was a much bigger stage than when they had left. They officially came back on the March 11th edition of Monday Nitro, and not long after, they made a huge splash by winning the World Tag Team Championship from Harlem Heat in July. Their victory showed the wrestling world that the Steiners were back in business. But just as quickly as they won the belts, they lost them only 3 days later, which became a recurring theme in their WCW run. Around that time, WCW was changing dramatically with the formation of the New World Order. The Outsiders, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, were leading the charge and quickly became the main rivals of the Steiners. The brothers went toe-to-toe with them in heated battles, and while the Steiners managed to defeat the Outsiders at Sold Out in January 1997, the win was short-lived. Eric Bischoff stripped them of the titles the very next night. Still, the brothers pushed forward. They continued feuding with Harlem Heat, as well as the Outsiders, and eventually scored more victories, even picking up the tag belts again later that year. But something was starting to change in Scott. By mid-1997, fans began noticing his physical transformation. His already muscular frame got even bigger, his signature mullet was chopped off, and he grew a goatee that gave him a completely new look. It wasn't just cosmetic. Scott's whole attitude was shifting. He started showing flashes of wanting the spotlight for himself, often leaving Rick to handle matches alone or refusing to tag his brother in. This tension was building towards something bigger. That bigger moment came in February 1998 at Super Brawl 8. The Steiners were defending their tag titles against the Outsiders, and just when Rick thought he could count on his brother, Scott shocked the world. Instead of fighting alongside Rick, he turned on him in the middle of the match, attacking his own flesh and blood. Scott handed the belts to the Outsiders and walked out, officially joining the NWO. The next night on Nitro, he cemented his new persona. He bleached his hair blonde, dyed his beard to match, and unveiled the character that fans would remember forever. Big Poppa Pump. With his new look came new nicknames. He briefly tried out White Thunder and Superstar, but eventually settled on the one that stuck, Big Poppa Pump. Along with his chainmail headgear, dark sunglasses, and intimidating physique, Scott Steiner reinvented himself completely. He wasn't just the other half of a tag team anymore. He was a singles star, and he carried himself like one. Throughout 1998, Scott aligned himself with fellow NWO member Buff Bagwell, and together they became a hated duo. Scott's betrayal of Rick turned into a bitter family feud that carried on for much of the year. By 1999, Scott was a permanent fixture near the top of WCW. He captured both the United States Heavyweight Championship and the World Television Championship, proving that he could thrive as a singles competitor. Constantly reminded fans, through his promos and his sheer size, that he was now the genetic freak. He wasn't just flexing for the cameras anymore. He was carving out his legacy as one of the most unique and unpredictable characters in wrestling. Of course, wrestling is never without setbacks. In mid-1999, Scott suffered a serious back injury that forced him to the sidelines and led to him being stripped of his U.S. title. WCW even teased his retirement in late 1999, but in classic Scott Steiner fashion, he came back that very same night, proving that he wasn't going anywhere. By 2000, he was once again a main event level star, switching alliances between different stables like the New Blood and later the Millionaires Club. The peak of his WCW career came in November 2000, when Scott finally captured the WCW World Heavyweight Championship by defeating Booker T at Mayhem. This was the crowning achievement of his singles run, and it cemented him as the face of WCW during its final months. He held the belt proudly and carried himself as the company's top heel, constantly feuding with Booker T until WCW closed its doors in March 2001. In fact, Steiner was the final man to ever hold the WCW World Heavyweight title before Vince McMahon bought out the company. When WCW folded, many stars jumped to the WWF, but Scott chose to wait out his contract with AOL Time Warner before making his next move. That next move came in the World Wrestling All-Stars promotion, where he captured their World Heavyweight Championship and continued to showcase his dominance internationally. Then, in late 2002, he finally returned to WWE after 8 years away. Scott made his big comeback at Survivor Series in Madison Square Garden, and it was clear the company wanted to present him as a major star. Both Raw and SmackDown's general managers, Eric Bischoff and Stephanie McMahon, tried to sign him to their brands, with Bischoff ultimately winning out. Almost immediately, Scott was put into a feud with Triple H for the World Heavyweight Championship. Their matches at Royal Rumble 2003 and No Way Out 2003 didn't quite live up to expectations, mainly because of Scott's lingering injuries, but they did solidify him as a dangerous challenger. And while it provided some entertaining moments, injuries again slowed Scott down. By August 2004, after foot surgery and months of recovery, he was released from WWE. But Steiner wasn't done. He kept his career alive through the independent scene, teaming with Rick again and even returning to Japan. By 2006, he was back in the spotlight, this time in TNA. He debuted as Jeff Jarrett's bodyguard and quickly made an impact. His run in TNA gave fans another chapter of classic Scott Steiner moments, including his infamous Steiner Math promo, a promo that became so outrageous it turned into wrestling legend. From there, Steiner continued working in TNA through different storylines, joining factions like the Main Event Mafia, reuniting with Rick, and even capturing more tag team gold. He bounced between promotions for years, wrestling in Puerto Rico's WWC, returning to TNA again in 2011, and even appearing in Impact Wrestling in 2017. Everywhere he went, fans knew exactly what to expect: chaos, intensity, and unforgettable promos. And finally, after decades in the business, the Steiner brothers were given the honor they truly deserved. In 2022, Scott and Rick were inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, recognized as one of the greatest tag teams of all time. For Scott Steiner, it was the perfect way to tie together a career that had seen him travel the world, win countless championships, reinvent himself multiple times, and leave fans with moments they'd never forget. And that wraps up today's video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss out on our next upload. Thanks for hanging out with us today, and we'll catch you in the next one. Take care.